Thank you very much. It's great to see everybody. Thank you so much for coming out on a rainy night when it's cold outside. We appreciate it. As Chris said, this is something we wanted to do for subscribers. We don't do enough for subscribers, and the fact that you're here tonight is really gratifying to us. And what we were hoping for was a conversation tonight from one of our local leaders, and we're hoping that you see this as something that comes with your subscription to the Bee. That we rely on our excellent reporting from outstanding reporters like Nicole Nixon, and what we do on the editorial board is we try to also bring understanding and explain issues. And so we're very happy to be here. And so without further ado, Congressman, you must be a little bit tired.
A little tired.
He was in DC last night. So why don't we start there? You just took a flight across country. You were in the chamber when the government shutdown ended. Can you take our subscribers sort of behind the scenes as to what it was like to be there? And also how you felt that this issue was ended, the longest government shutdown in our history, and how you felt.
Well, if I can go back to why we did the shutdown, right? So what preceded the shutdown? We're not even through President Trump's first year in office, and it's been unprecedented how rapidly things have changed. You know, you saw in the first months what Elon Musk and Doge did in terms of total disruption, the layoffs. That then went to some of the rescissions. You know, it's Congress's job to pass the budget, to appropriate funds, and put those funds out there. It's the president's job to take the funds that we've appropriated and then allocate and implement those funds. Total disregard for that. So, you know, vindictiveness to blue states. And then the last straw right before the shutdown was this rescissions package. So I'm a senior member on the Foreign Affairs Committee, foreign aid, food support, et cetera, $4 billion that was sitting there meant to be allocated to meet our global responsibilities. They just said, we're not going to do it, and we're going to get rid of those $4 billion. So it was a series of factors that said, you know, this is the one point of leverage that we have, so, you know, we're not going to play ball with you on this. On top of that, obviously, we saw the looming healthcare cuts in terms of the ACA subsidies coming at folks. And so it was a confluence of all of those things that led into this. Now, this was a shutdown unlike any that I've seen before. I was in Congress during the 35-day shutdown in 2018, 2019, which was over the president's desire to get the funding to build his wall in the first Trump term. This one, Mike Johnson said, okay, well, we're not going to come back in session, which every other shutdown, we've always been in session. We've been in Washington, D.C. until the government opened, voting on different things, voting to open parts of the government that were important to our national security and public safety. That didn't happen this time. So you had federal workers going without pay. And then when the SNAP benefits got cut, I would never say I agree with Josh Hawley, conservative senator from Missouri, but he wrote an op-ed saying we can't do this. We've got, like, because he knows a lot of his constituents. So, you know, I was at the Rancho Cordova Food Hub last week, and you saw the desperation in people's faces. The president didn't really care. Because, you know, we pushed the courts to say you've got to deliver those SNAP benefits. The courts agreed with us. The president went back and said, you know, fought with the courts. So that was the pressure that we were under on this. I'm glad that food's going to get delivered. I'm glad that, you know, we funded SNAP through the end of the fiscal year, that there are 3 appropriation bills, but we haven't solved the healthcare issue yet. And, you know, we're an open enrollment system, so that's why you saw a lot of the Democrats push back and say, you know, we're not done here. I don't know what Mike Johnson's going to do. I hope John Thune does give a vote.
But should we even be at this point? I mean, how do you feel about the 8 people who broke ranks and voted with the Republicans to set this up?
I mean, they didn't consult me. I understand why they did what they did. They saw federal workers and folks going without pay. They saw folks struggling with the ability to just put food on their table. So I understand that, and I'm empathetic to all of that. On the Senate side, they did get a promise from John Thune that there would be a subsidies vote. I don't know what Mike Johnson's going to do. He's not given us that promise, which is why a lot of us voted no yesterday.
I'm curious, Congressman, what you think of the messaging around the shutdown and whether Democrats have kind of lost that messaging war. Republicans and President Trump, every opportunity they've had these last 43 days have called it the Democrat shutdown from day one on government websites. When Trump signed the bill in the Oval Office last night, he, said this was Democrats' fault. What do you think just overall right now this year about the messaging from Democrats in Congress about all of this?
I mean, I think this was Donald Trump's shutdown, and obviously we've been saying that. I think what you saw at the polls last week suggested the American public saw this as Donald Trump's shutdown. I think you also saw the callousness of Donald Trump. Again, there's nothing more basic than being able to put food on your table, and he didn't really care about that. He's throwing a big party at the White House as people are struggling to put food on their table. That is not a president of the entire United States. He was, here in Sacramento County, he rescinded funds that were already appropriated, grants, things like that. He was particularly going after blue states. So I think that backlash lands squarely with Donald Trump. We were also successful at raising the healthcare crisis in this country. Folks are looking at their premiums, sometimes doubling, sometimes tripling. Families can't afford to pay for those healthcare premiums. That is an issue that we successfully raised. If they don't give us a vote on those subsidies, they own it.
What's your level of confidence that there will be a vote? I know say you don't know what he's going to do, but do you think there'll be enough pressure that he'll force the vote, or he'll do basically what he's done, which is give people like a week's-long vacation?
So I think John Thune, the leader in the Senate, the Republican leader, is scared enough by the results of last week's election that he'll honor that vote. Now, he's said he doesn't guarantee that it's going to pass. Mike Johnson takes his orders from Donald Trump. And, Mike Johnson knows the first day he pushes back on Donald Trump is going to be the last day of his speakership. So Mike Johnson has not told us that he'll put a subsidy vote on the floor. We introduced a discharge petition yesterday. I anticipate every Democrat will sign that discharge petition. That just gets us to 215 votes. We've got to get to 218 to force a vote on the floor. Can we get 3 Republicans to join with us?
Can you?
There are plenty of Republicans out there that are talking about subsidies. Some in our region, maybe one that I might be running against. We'll see if he signs that discharge petition and gets that subsidy vote on the floor.
No, just that he had, noting that Representative Kevin Kiley has said he's going to introduce legislation. Well, this was before the shutdown ended, but yeah.
I mean, there is a discharge petition. So we successfully got to 218 signatures on the Jeffrey Epstein thing. Mike Johnson said he's going to bring it to the floor next week. Let's see if we get that vote next week.
Yeah, I do want to take that one. So what is your level of confidence that's going to happen?
I mean, he's publicly said it. He's said it yesterday after we got to 218 votes. I think it would be hard for him to back out. It does seem like the president is trying to pressure, some of the 4 Republicans that have signed on to that discharge petition. I guess Lauren Boebert was at the White House yesterday, and they were trying to twist some arms. So, will they be successful? Because if we lose 1 Republican and there's only 4 on there, then that drops back down to 217. So, what is the president trying to hide here? I think he's actually making it worse for himself.
But he doesn't seem to care. I mean, he actually seems to enjoy it. So we've written a lot about the people who would be affected by these huge spikes in healthcare. What does it feel like to be a Democrat and basically have to rely on a few a few Republican defectors to basically do what we should be doing, which is taking care of people.
I mean, it is not fun being in the minority, and that's where we are right now. So in the House, unless you can get to 218 votes, you can do very little. The Senate, because of the filibuster, they have some ability to block legislation. I think our messaging was correct to focus on just the cost of living, affordability, just bread and butter issues, the ability to pay your rent, the ability to pay for food. I think that's what we missed in 2024. I think we did great legislation, but we didn't talk to the anxieties of everyday working folks. And I think that's this moment in time. I think that's why Mamdani won in New York City. But his message wasn't any different than Abigail Spanberger or Mikey Sherrill's in Virginia and New Jersey. It was about affordability. It was about the basics. President Trump's policies have not solved any of those issues, and I think that's what we saw was that backlash. In fact, they've made them worse.
But picking up on Nicole's previous question about messaging, wasn't it the failure of messaging that got us in this situation in the first place? And I wonder now, as someone who's been in Congress for a decade now, when you reflect on 2024, where did it go wrong? And why wasn't the bread and butter issues that people are experiencing, why wasn't that the Democrats' message?
Yeah, so I think a couple things happened. I think, and this is just my opinion, Joe Biden was elected to bring back some normalcy and calm things. I think the mistake that we did, along with President Biden, is really what the public was asking for was something new, go forward. And I think what happened was a restoration of things that had existed before. I think that's what we realize right now is, again, there's a younger generation that you're seeing really engaged right now that's pushing on things. We were talking earlier, I talked to a lot of 35-year-old, 40-year-olds who never believe they're going to be able to buy a house. A lot of them are delaying starting families and so forth. That's very real. It's not going to be enough for us to run against Donald Trump. We're going to have to speak to those folks, but we're going to also have concrete solutions for how we're going to address their issues.
So do you think the Democratic Party will get behind that? Because Chuck Schumer did not ever endorse Mamdani.
I mean, that's Chuck Schumer, so I can't speak for him. I think what we did, I think what Abigail Spanberger did, Mikey Sherrill did, what Mamdani did, was talk to those issues. Talk to the bread and butter issues, food, shelter, clothing. Can I pay my rent? Can I buy a house one day? Can I get a job? If I get that job, will I get a decent paycheck? I think that's what these elections are going to be about. I was not asked, but I did text him after he won the primary and congratulated him.
We'll have some time for audience questions at the end, I believe. So
like
hold your questions.
I like that. And we will get to audience questions.
Talking about younger Dems and things that they're frustrated by, the list is quite long, and it includes the war in Gaza ongoing. Wonder if, what you think of that, how the U.S. has handled it, if anything should have been done differently, and where you stand personally on it.
Sure. So I think a number of things can be. I think what happened on October 7th was heinous and horrific. I also think the innocent loss of life after October 7th, how Netanyahu's prosecuted this war, is equally horrific. I support a Jewish state of Israel, but I also don't think you'll ever have peace if you don't have a Palestinian homeland where the Palestinians can live in. Those can equally be true. I do not support Benjamin Netanyahu. I've met him multiple times. In many ways, he reminds me of Trump, someone who's more focused on his own survival than he is about the country that he's supposed to be leading. I think he has taken Israel to a much worse, isolated place. So as someone who does support a Jewish state of Israel, I think Israel is worse off today than it was on October 6th.
Do you think that there has been a genocide in Palestine?
Yeah, I don't know if I'd use the term genocide, but I do think how they prosecuted this war has left tens of thousands of innocent individuals, children and others dead.
So,
and then I would just add, starvation should not be a tool of war, and I think very much how they have not allowed us to take aid in has led to a real humanitarian crisis.
So you're going to be running for office, and we're going to talk about that. But Democrats now are facing something that maybe they didn't foresee a couple of years ago, that there's been a seismic shift in how Democrats, particularly young Democrats, feel about funding the Israeli military and about what happened in Gaza. How are you going to traverse that when so many young people in particular have different attitudes than Democrats from previous generations?
I mean, I think that shift has been happening over time, right? So over the decade that I've been in Congress, you've seen a shift. I think a lot of that is driven by Benjamin Netanyahu. I think a lot of us still support a Jewish state of Israel, but we're really far away from a two-state solution. I think we want to see that Palestinian state. I think you're going to, even if the ceasefire holds, there's a real question of what do we do with Gaza? How do you rebuild that? Because Netanyahu destroyed Gaza. I mean, there's nothing there at this point, and then you're still seeing encroachment in the West Bank.
He did, but President Joe Biden didn't do anything about that, and Kamala Harris couldn't seem to formulate a strong opinion about that. And the New York Times just had a poll, Times Siena, where 6 out of 10 voters said that Israel should end its military campaign, and that people felt like, and there are quite a few Democrats who did feel it was a genocide. So it comes back to that question of how are Democrats going to handle this? Because Kamala Harris is out on a book tour, and she's getting protested pretty much everywhere she goes.
I mean, I think we have to answer the questions that are asked. So I do think Israel needs to end their military campaign. I think they need to end it a year ago. I think largely after the first month after October 7th, they had accomplished a lot of what they needed to do in terms of protecting the Israeli homeland. Naftali Bennett, who's a conservative prime minister, former prime minister of Israel, said, you should just create a buffer zone in between, and then, again.
Why don't I walk to you and
So this is a follow-up question about Palestine and what they're asking you. So Israel has a line item in our budget. Are you willing to stop funding Israel and really stand up for a Palestinian state? I mean, what they are doing both in Gaza and the West Bank is basically trying to exterminate a people. And there's no way around it. But it's not going to stop unless the United States stops funding this.
So we'll see when that vote comes up. I think you will see a lot of Democrats struggling with what that vote looks like at this moment. My position has always been for a two-state solution. I've been to the West Bank, I've visited Palestinian leaders, I've been to Hebron and talked to the Palestinians. There's no future for Israel without a two-state solution. Right now, that seems like that's never going to happen, especially what you're seeing with settlers in the West Bank and what they're doing. We were talking about that earlier. We'll continue to push that. I also think what Netanyahu has done has been bad for Israel. They're isolated on the world stage today. They don't have any friends. So even if you support a Jewish state of Israel, their future doesn't look as bright as it did on October 6th. So I don't know what comes next for Israel. What we need to do for the Palestinians is how do you rebuild a Palestinian state? How do you create a Palestinian homeland? What does that look like? Can you get the Arab states to engage in that? All of that's going to be super complicated, and I don't think any of that happens while Netanyahu's in office. I don't have a vote to vote Netanyahu out. I hope that the Israeli public is fed up with this and fatigued, and and we will see when that vote comes up.
This is David Mandel. He was a copy editor at the Bee once. When I first got to the Bee, he used to edit my copy. Remember that, David?
Oh yeah, it was awful. Just to follow up on that last question, there is pending legislation in Congress, H.R. 3565, known as the Block the Bombs Act, which has been around for a few months. It's little by little now has, I think, 56 co-sponsors in addition to the original sponsor, Ramirez. It based at it's very very moderate. It talks about only stopping offensive weapons as opposed to defensive weapons, as if you can really differentiate. And I don't think you can. But at the very least, why can't you co-sponsor that or declare that you will support it, preferably co-sponsor it? I mean, clearly the only way to stop Israel from continuing its war is to stop the flow of weapons, as the person over here said.
So we'll take a look at that. There's a number of bills out there. You know, we introduced the first bill to say, you know, and this was back in 2023 to open up the humanitarian aid and get the aid there. There's a bill now. We've got to rebuild a healthcare system because they systematically targeted a lot of the hospitals and so forth. You know, a year ago, we started talking to UC Davis about, you know, how do you do telehealth, telemedicine? That's something that we know how to do well at UC Davis to actually start delivering care and rebuild. You're going to have to rebuild all of Gaza because they destroyed it.
All right, we have a lot to talk
We'll
to,
get
so
to those questions,
I'll talk about it. So let's move on. I wanted to ask you, like you said, it's been a long year. We're less than 1 year into Donald Trump's second term. I wanted to ask you about some votes you've taken this year. You told the Bee recently that you regretted a vote you took in favor of a resolution honoring the life and legacy of the conservative activist Charlie Kirk. Tell me a little bit about what was going through your head when you did cast that vote, and then when you came to change your mind about it.
Yeah, so the bill itself was 80% about condemning political violence and so forth, but 20% of it was problematic in how I was going to vote present on that bill. Our leadership told us not to vote present, to either take a walk, which I wasn't going to do. You didn't elect me to take a walk. And I ended up voting with the leadership recommendation, which was, you know, let's condemn political violence. I regretted it as soon as I did. I talked to some of my supporters, and that's why it's never easy for a politician when you're talking to reporters to say, you know what, that was a mistake, but you know, I would have changed that vote.
You also voted this year to censure two of your own Democratic colleagues, Representative Al Green, earlier this year after he was escorted out of the chamber during the State of the Union presidential address to Congress, and also Representative Ilhan Omar, who made some comments after Charlie Kirk was killed.
I don't actually believe, I'll check with Nancy, but did I vote on that censure of Ilhan?
Well, what are your thoughts? What are your thoughts today on those votes?
I mean, on the Al Green, so I think what Al did was not appropriate. There was a whole conversation within our caucus that said, keep the spotlight on Donald Trump. I think when he got up there and did that, if you look at the look on Donald Trump's face, that's exactly what they wanted to go to censure. So it took the spotlight off of what Donald Trump was saying in that State of the Union. It also started to weaken Democratic leadership and so forth. I've met with the community members. I also understand how a lot of the African American community and others took that vote. So would I have voted present? Maybe. That's how Al Green voted on that, on his own censorship.
I mean, it's a time where it's hard to know how to fight back, right? When you're in the minority, and because there are quite a few people who were in favor of what Al Green did, that they saw it as righteous protest, and so what's the answer now?
Yes.
Because we're gearing up into an election year. What's going to be the answer?
So righteous protest is. I don't think that was the right venue at that particular moment in time. But again, I mean, it's up to Al, and Al and I have talked about it.
I also think and wonder if what you think of this, if this lends to why younger Democrats are so frustrated with the party, because there's this kind of lionization of institutions and decorum over, you know, Trump's threat to democracy, as a lot of people feel. Do you see that? Do you agree with that that's happening at all?
Yeah, I do. I mean, you see, it's not just young people. I think a lot of folks right here and a lot of older Democrats feel this threat to democracy. I think we see it every day. This is not normal. It's not normal to see folks in unmarked vans with bandanas on their faces just going out and grabbing folks, or National Guards from one state going into cities in another state when there's no real threat. This is not normal. So yes, I appreciate the energy and youth of, you know, it's not just Democrats. I think there are a lot of independents and even some Republicans that are very worried about what this looks like. So, again, we just ended a very long shutdown. I think this is, it is going to take all of us because this is not Trump's first term. We saw what he did on January 6th. I lived through that.
We spoke that day, if I remember. I don't know where you were. You told me just a secure location, but I mean, there's just been so much that's happened since then.
And this is worse, right? I mean, what he's doing to try to steal the midterm elections, right? Again, today the Justice Department joined the lawsuit to overturn Prop 50. I don't think they have a case there because the voters voted for it, and they're not trying to overturn what Texas is doing or what North Carolina is doing or anyone else. But I think he will use every tool that he has, including weaponizing the Justice Department, which he's going to do against Adam Schiff. I think he just filed against Eric Swalwell. He's doing it against James Comey. So this is not normal circumstances.
So in an election year, how are Democrats going to fight back?
I mean, we're going to have to win elections, right? I mean, we are going to have to take the energy of the youth, the energy of the folks that are scared, and we're going to have to go out and win elections. I think that's what Abigail Spanberg did. I think that's what Mikey Sherrill did. I think, you saw us win races in Georgia. I think that's what Zahn Mamdani did. So we're going to have to take that energy and harness it and go out there and fight back.
So on the order of fighting back, this thing with the Epstein files, is that a sideshow or is that real?
I mean, none of us was paying attention to the Epstein files necessarily. It was something that was on the MAGA right, that they were making an issue. But the president talked about releasing the files over and over again, and then all of a sudden doesn't want to release files. Like, if there's nothing there, release the files. Let's see what's in the files. That isn't what the American people care about. That's not going to put food on their table. That's not going to pay their rent. But you know what? What is Donald Trump trying to hide right now? And I think that's what we're concerned about. And that's what, Thomas Massey and I never vote on anything together. He's a friend. He's my classmate. I'm glad that Thomas and Ro Khanna are leading this charge, and I hope we get that vote.
Sorry, I just want to follow up on one thing. Did you say that you don't think the average American cares as much about the Epstein files?
I think they care about putting food on their table and paying rent. I think they are paying attention to the Epstein files now because we all want to know what the president is hiding and why is he so afraid of what's in those files.
Okay, so since we're subscribers, would a subscriber ask me to do something? If it's not against the law, I can't do it. So this is George Rand.
And not on the Epstein files. Okay. Why don't you mention young people wanting generational change? I'm 76. I am not a young person.
Absolutely.
I retired in 2014 at 65. There should be a lot of people in Congress that are retiring. I'm glad that we have some people now. I supported Pelosi in '87, but I didn't think she'd be in there this long. We have to have generational change because new people have new ideas, a new way of doing things. The older generation needs to step back.
Do you want me to address that, or?
I guess to make that into a question, do you think the Democratic Party has a problem with its elders staying in the game too long and not making room for younger voices?
I support what Nancy Pelosi decided to do this week. I think she's a historic figure, probably the best politician that I've seen, but she's making way for that next generation. I do think it is going to be their future. I think we're going to see, how do we take the energy of that generation? Don't toss out experience necessarily. How do you marry that together? And then start to pass the baton. I think that's the shift that's occurring. But I do think you're going to see a lot of primaries and a lot of races. You're seeing some in our own backyard right now.
So my question goes back to the messaging then. I don't get a clear message from the Democratic Party. I don't get it that says, this is what we're going to do. We want to embrace the younger voters. We want to keep the older, intelligent voters. I don't get it. The shutdown. Is that what all of the Democratic Party really wanted to do? Did they all vote for that? No. You got like 8 senators voting for it. Was Schumer the one that I mean, he obviously knew, right? He wasn't going to be in a vacuum. He knew that was happening. Is that what we want our leadership to say? That we're okay with that? What's the message coming to the public? To me, the message is we're wishy-washy. We don't really know. We don't have a clear direction.
I mean, the message has to be, can we get you a good job? Can we give you, with that job, can you get a paycheck? With that paycheck, can you afford to put food on their table? Can you buy a house one day? And here's how we're going to do that. I think that's what Mamdani did in New York. I think that's what Abigail did in Virginia. It's got to be honed in on those working folks, the folks that feel like they're working every day, but they're falling further and further behind. We have them right here. How do we build 2-bedroom, 1-bath starter homes for folks? We can do it here in Sacramento County. We're working on what that looks like. How do we build affordability? How do we create those jobs? It's got to be on those bread and butter issues. The food insecurity in our own community. Healthcare is bread and butter. That's why we. Again, I can't speak for those 8 senators.
But the party as a whole should. To let everybody know that maybe this wasn't really our idea. This is why we ended up doing it. But our message going forward is.
I mean, so we're going to fight for the subsidies, but it isn't just the whole healthcare system's broken today, right? You're paying more and more every day. You're getting less and less access. You know, can we come to a system where every American has basic health care? That if they get sick, they can go see a doctor. If they get really sick, they don't worry about being bankrupt. They can get the care that they need. That's going to sound like universal health care. That is what I'm talking about. So we're going to have to do the subsidies because it'll take us time to get through that. But we should get to a system of universal coverage right now. I wouldn't put everyone in Medicare because Medicare is struggling at this moment. But can we create a system like Medicare that is available for every American? Well, that's what I'm saying. So the only reason I don't use that term single, because it's not government-run healthcare. We should have government-funded healthcare that gives every American basic access to healthcare. Here's what a basic insurance policy for a 20-year-old looks like. The reason why I'm struggling with the subsidies is that $26 billion just goes to the health plans, right? And the health plans just keep raising the rates, and we just keep increasing the subsidies. It doesn't fundamentally change anything. So we are at a moment in time where everyone, Democrats, Republicans, are sitting there saying, this healthcare system doesn't work any longer. The Medicare cuts or the Medicaid cuts that are coming in that big, beautiful bill is going to collapse rural healthcare. It's already teetering, but you will see a collapse of the entire rural healthcare system. You see huge areas of the South where there is no maternity services right now. So that is not a good thing because those pregnant women are not getting prenatal care. That is going to lead to worse outcomes. They should not have to go to the emergency room to deliver their baby. The system is collapsing.
Okay, we're going to get to everybody. I promise.
Can we talk
I
about
promise, Dr. Flo. We're going to get to everybody.
Can we talk about Prop 50 now?
Yes.
Okay, so you have announced that you are running in the newly drawn 3rd district instead of the 6th district, which you represent now. That includes Rancho Cordova, Folsom, a lot of the Lake Tahoe area. What did you take into consideration as you were looking at this new map and deciding what to do?
So I've had the privilege of representing much of Sacramento County at one time or another. When I looked at the 2 districts, politically they're pretty similar. They're both D+6, Kamala and Gavin won both, so that wasn't the consideration. Some of the issues that we've been working on in Rancho Cordova, Fair Oaks, Carmichael, Arden Arcade, getting Folsom back as well. Rancho and Folsom are 2 of the fastest growing cities in the state of California. You're seeing a lot of development south of Highway 50. How does that grow? How do we make sure we grow in a responsible way, protect open space? We brought back millions of dollars for infrastructure funding in that area as well. So those are issues that I want to continue working on. We've also gotten millions of dollars for Mather because we do want to make that a transportation hub for Northern California, take business away from Oakland. So those are issues that are super important to job creation, economic development, and how we grow as a community. And then I just talked about rural healthcare. So I've never really had rural Northern California. So that 40% that's new to me that I've never represented represents a lot of rural America. I want to focus in on rural healthcare, meeting with the rural healthcare folks next week and going to get out there and start talking to the hospitals out there. Because if that is an existential crisis that's coming at us. And then the issues up in Tahoe and Truckee, super important to us. The water issues are incredibly important to Sacramento and all of Northern California, so I'll get Folsom Lake back. And how we manage surface water, how we store things. Those are super important. But a lot of it really was the new areas. The rural healthcare crisis is something that I want to get involved in.
This all happened so fast. Now we have this new congressional map. 4 months ago, this was just a pie-in-the-sky idea. What did you think when you first heard of this? A lot of Democrats at the very, very beginning, when the governor mentioned it, were uncomfortable with getting rid of this map drawn by the Independent Redistricting Commission.
So let me start with, I support the Independent Redistricting Commission, but we don't live in normal times. We see what Donald Trump is trying to do in terms of steal this election. I was not one of those Democrats that said, let's not do this. In fact, I gave up my district, which was a pretty safe district, a D+13 district, and said, go ahead and split it into 2 D+6s, because this is about getting the majority. And the truth be told, the only way for us to stop Donald Trump is to get the majority. If we don't get the majority in 2026, I think we're going to have a hard time in 2028. I think they will do a lot of things. He will do a lot of things to hold on to power.
And if I understand, a lot of you and your Democratic congressional colleagues were involved in some closed-door meetings, kind of trying to decide what this map was going to look like. Were there concerns from people? I'm just so curious what the conversations were, if people were concerned about doing this, about giving up parts of their district, like you mentioned, and what the arguments were for moving ahead.
I mean, I can only talk about the conversations that I had about, my current district. And again, I was, one of those Democrats from the get-go that said, look, we have to do everything we can to get the majority. So if we can create 2 competitive districts, let's go for it.
And then we've done a lot of reporting here at the Bee about how this affects representation in California, a lot of concern about rural representation, which you mentioned you're interested in going to the Tahoe area. What do you say to your Republican colleagues, Representative Kiley, Doug LaMalfa, who are looking at being out of a job next year because of, a political fight?
I mean, I'd say tell Texas to stand down, tell Missouri to stand down, tell North Carolina to stand down, tell President Trump to stand down, and we'll stand down. But look, I support independent redistricting. We voted on a bill when we were in the majority that banned mid-decade redistricting. The Senate never took it up. I hope when we get the majority, I hope when we get the White House, we pass a bill that bans mid-decade redistricting, that we make the whole country independent commissions. But right now, this is about getting the majority. And if Donald Trump's going to play dirty and hardball, we're going to have to play hardball too.
Could be Kevin Kiley against you?
Yeah, I don't know. I know I've declared where I'm going to run. As far as I know,
He's sounding pretty moderate lately.
he has been, but he's been around for a while, and so. But I don't believe he's announced where he's going to run yet.
No, he hasn't announced. I promised Dr. Flo that I'd let her ask a question. So this is Flo Jean Cofer, the Sacramento Bee endorser for mayor.
Thank you for being here and for putting this on. I was part of the group back in March that sat down with you after the censorship, and so I'm pleased to hear that you have evolved on those issues, and I'm also pleased to hear that you've evolved a little bit on healthcare, because at the time you said to us that as a party, you've done everything to make healthcare attainable and affordable, and I actually was shocked at that statement because it is not affordable in its current iteration, so I'm glad you've evolved. But the reason why I asked and shouted out about did you endorse Mamdani is because what I'm seeing right now is a conversation about the changes that are needed, and I'm glad people are in a reflective place. But I'm curious to know, you've been in Congress for the last, now almost 12 years. And so, or maybe it is 12 years. And so I'm curious to know, have you been mentoring the next generation? Have you offered endorsements to younger candidates who are bringing a fresh message that is doing those things? Because it's cute to offer your congratulations after the fact, but you are one of the biggest fundraisers in the Democratic Party. He could have used your help, especially when he was going up against billionaires. And it felt to me like the Democratic Party was basically saying, we'd rather side with Trump than let progressives, be a part of things. That vote blue no matter who is for progressive folks to have to be more moderate, but never for moderates to be more progressive. And so I guess I'm curious to know what you specifically have done in this region to mentor, to endorse, to be supportive of younger folks, both here as well as nationally, because you do represent all of us in Congress.
So I did not get involved in the New York mayor's race on one side or the other than to text Mamdani after he won the primary. My congratulations. Wasn't cute. I mean, he's a Democratic nominee, so obviously I supported him in that way, and I want him to be successful. I also think, if he's successful, then he potentially demonstrates a model of how you marry, the enthusiasm of young people with older folks. It's been great watching AOC evolve over time, coming in as an activist and with that youthful energy, but also realizing you've got to get 218 votes. So watching her develop her policy chops. We worked together on the AI task force, and again, that's something that's super important because it is going to impact all of our lives. So she's led on a lot of legislation there. Here closer to home, I do think it's important for us to start thinking about what the next generation looks like. I do know most of our local electeds. I talk to them all the time, offer them advice when they want that advice, and offer them help. So.
Last question, I guess. I wanted to ask, we talked about a lot of the big stories in Washington this week. I wanted to ask you about the bombshell story out of Sacramento this week, which was the indictment of Governor Gavin Newsom's former chief of staff, Dana Williamson. I have experience in state government, I believe.
Right.
Did you know her personally?
I don't know her.
Okay. Do you think that there's something, do you know the details of the...
Just what you guys published. I read your story.
Okay. So, it involves a lot of consultants and lobbyists, and I wonder what you think of the culture of California and Sacramento politics, where consultants wield so much money and power and influence.
So I don't think it's just California politics, though, right? I think that is a shift that you're starting to see, that political consulting is $1 billion business, right? So they make a lot of money in the status quo. I think if you look at campaigns like Mamdani's campaign, but there's other campaigns that are using new media, that are talking to folks in different ways. I think that's all changing. What does that look like? I don't know Gavin's former chief of staff. Again, what I read in the Bee story certainly sounds pretty damning and incriminating. I know Javier Becerra fairly well and have not talked to Javier about it, but it looks pretty bad. So, and I do think that is something, if we want to evolve as a party, I think we have to change the way we do campaigns. What does that look like? It's not broadcast television any longer. I think that is something we missed in 2024. I think Donald Trump went on every podcast. He took every interview. He did everything. So whether you agree with him or don't agree with him, he was out there everywhere. I think that served Mamdani well, that he was out there doing things. And I do see younger folks, starting to influence how older folks like me, I'm not that old, but how we're communicating with folks. And I think we've got to adapt to that. Again, the Bee is going through that evolution as well, thinking about how you talk to folks and meet them where they are.
Can I ask you a local question?
Sure.
So, our downtown needs a lot of help. And I've been at the Sacramento Bee for a very long time, and that's been the conversation the entire time I've been here. What can you do to try to not just help downtown, but get so more people can be living downtown?
Yeah, so a couple things that I push. So I can use the bully pulpit that I have. I don't think the right answer is to say, hey, all of you state workers, you have to come back downtown. If they can accomplish their job through telework and so forth, through some hybrid model. I've been talking about that for a long time, though, that we should take those jobs to where the workers live. what the pandemic demonstrated is, we've got a downtown that was built on 100,000 people coming to work every day. Post-pandemic, you had 20,000 people. So we now know where those workers live. They live in the suburbs, could be up in Roseville, could be in Elk Grove, could be in Rancho. I think the state, instead of building brand new state office buildings downtown, ought to do a land swap and give the developers some of the best property around Capitol Park, around the Capitol, and say, we'll give you this property. Those are non-functional old buildings anyways. Build a back office for the state where the workers live so they can live and work in their same community. Now, the argument I used to get is, well, you can't build Department of Health Services in Elk Grove because you have folks that live up in Roseville, and you can't have them commuting all the way there. But that's not how people work today. You could build shared space, hoteling, WeWork type of space where those health services workers in Elk Grove can rent a room, those up in Roseville. That's what I would push. And then I would try to get more people living downtown, build higher density housing, mixed use, affordable housing, make it easier to build. That's one thing. The other thing is the state owns a ton of vacant property downtown. They don't pay taxes on it. So that hurts the city's revenue base. Can we go to the state? Can we push them to say, you've got this vacant property. Let us build on it. Let's put that into a public land trust. Let's bond against that land trust. Let's get the developers in there and build. So when I talk about building those starter homes or starter condos, let's build things so young people can actually afford to live there and build up equity. So I've talked to the developer. We can build 2-bedroom, 1-bath starter homes for $300,000. We did it after World War II. Look at Elmhurst, look at Tahoe Park, look at a bunch of neighborhoods there. The city and county own a bunch of vacant property. So we're working on a model, and I'll use my bully pulpit to try to push this through. Can you build those starter homes? Now, this is not the homeless. This is that 40-year-old that wants to buy a house, build up equity for $300,000. Now, you would want them to live there for 5-7 years. You don't want private investors to get in there. Going to go to CalSTRS and say, look, we should do the Henry Ford model, which was build cars that your workers could build. We should build homes so the teachers can actually live in the school districts where they teach. We can do this. We just have to get creative. And it is an existential crisis. And if we do that as Democrats, we will win elections. If we address those bread and butter issues with real ideas and people see that progress. So that's stuff that we're going to try.
Okay. I'm going to get to some questions. Okay, I'm going to come back to you because you've had one already. I'm sorry.
So I know sometimes there are things that are not for public consumption. You were talking about fighting back. You were talking about Mike Johnson answering to Trump. Do you get a sense that some of your colleagues on the other side of the aisle are going to be willing to stand up and try to take back some of the power that they have abdicated?
So I don't have a lot of faith that they're going to stand up and push back. They haven't up to this point. Perhaps the election results last week have scared enough of them. I think if Mike Johnson actually does give us an Epstein vote next week, how many Republicans are going to vote to release the files? That'll be telling. Will the 4 Republicans will they actually stay on that discharge petition? Because again, if we lose one, then there is no vote. Will Mike Johnson actually bring it to the floor? I don't have a lot of faith right now, and I never would have said, I miss Mitch McConnell or Paul Ryan. But at least in the first Trump term, they understood when they had full power that we were a different branch of government, that part of our job was to be a check on the administrative branch. That is not the case today. The Republicans have fully advocated total control to one man.
I'm going to go to this gentleman in the back. One second.
What is your level of confidence that in 3 years there will be another presidential election?
There will be a presidential election. Will it be fair? Will they manipulate it? Let's focus on 2026. Will that be a fair election? I mean, again, think about what is happening with redistricting. I actually like what we did in California with the Independent Redistricting Commission. It was the right thing to do. It was good governance. It's what the entire country should do. We just overwhelmingly voted to change that because we've got to fight back, because I'm not as confident as you that we win in 2026. If it was a fair playing field in a normal election, we win in 2026. I mean, that's why we passed Prop 50. That's why, we're leaning on Maryland to do what they can, perhaps New York, Illinois. It's not the right way to go about doing this, but if we lose in 2026, it will be very hard to have a fair election in 2028. We will have an election. So will it be fair? Will he use the Justice Department? Will he go? I don't know. I don't think he's going to run for a third term, but with that man, I don't believe anything that he says.
Yeah. Get to you.
Hi, my name's Erica Lee. My dad used to appear in your commercials. I saw you at Stand Down. I also tried to challenge Doris Matsui until recently. I'm one of those younger generations who tried to oust her because she won't retire. But I agree that the messaging is still nebulous. I believe a majority of the Democrats helped create the conditions for Trump to win again. We've lost to two non-consecutive terms after an insurrection. So what makes you think that the Democrats know how to get out of this? You need a North Star to vote for, like Medicare for all. Because I just don't understand what the messaging is still.
So it's going to be affordability, but we have to define what that is. Is that... So it worked though, right? I mean, it worked in New York, it worked in Virginia, it's got to be, food on your table, a roof over your head, the ability to get a decent paycheck, the ability with that paycheck to have basic health care. It's going to be all those things. Now that's not a campaign slogan. I would call it universal health care. Because I think that is where we're headed. Again, I think the sweet spot is how do you harness the energy, the communication skills of the young generation that, with some of the policy chops of older folks that you can actually implement and then marry those two together. If we can do that, then I think we will be successful in 2026. Okay. And then I think we do have to have a policy platform, a Project 2029 equivalent that we can actually sell to the public.
Speaking of young progressives kind of coming into the scene and like the Mamdani kind of effect and all of that, a big thing that a lot of the left wing of the party, a lot of the candidates, including some in this room, and I know at least one in your race, are pledging, we won't take contributions from X or we won't take contributions from Y. And that, I guess, so for me, if it's easy to sit up here and say we should lower prices on healthcare or Israel should stop bombing toddlers and we should stop helping them do that. But if I can go on the internet and see that you have taken hundreds of thousands of dollars from interests whose goals are who are in opposition to those values, I guess, what is the message to me? And I know this isn't just you, this is a lot of folks who are in your profession, but why would I believe that you are going to go against people you're taking money from? And if you are, if the interests of those folks do go against your constituency and you do back your constituency, then what are those people really getting for their money?
So again, I'm a supporter of the Jewish state of Israel. So I have taken money from folks that support a Jewish state of Israel. So I don't know what the amount is, but I do have supporters that, I also believe in a Palestinian homeland. So I would welcome taking money from folks that believe in that as well. And I have had supporters on that side. So I have taken support from folks. I also, when I look at a collapsing healthcare system today, Flo's correct. I do think we need to go to universal coverage. I think we need to create a basic essential policy for every American. What that looks like, how we get there, I think that should be funded through the federal government. I do think part of what was appealing to Mamdani was that he took on big corporate interests and wanted a fair corporate tax rate and so forth, and address that. We don't have a fair tax rate in America right now. I think the big beautiful bill is going to make that a lot worse, because I think most of those benefits are going to go to the wealthiest folks. I think those are all things that don't put me at odds with progressives. I think those are things that progressives are articulating. I think we should then talk about what those policies look like, and I think that's the platform that we have to develop to say, if we do get the White House, here's what we would do. So again, this is not, I was elected in 2012. This is a very different moment in time than where we were in 2012, because I do think you're seeing, a large portion of this country, and it's not just young people. We did a telephone town hall last week or the week before, and there was a 70-year-old that I was talking to on that telephone town hall saying, I've got to work 40 hours a week. Am I ever going to be able to retire? She should be retired right now. She should be able to retire with dignity and so forth. Those are all things. That's not just 35-year-olds. That's happening all across this country. And I think if we can figure those things out, come up with a platform that addresses, the dignity of work when you're young, the security of work, the ability to work over a lifetime, but then when you hit your senior years, the ability to be able to retire with a dignified life. Those are all core democratic values. Those are not Donald Trump's values or MAGA's values. But I hear you clearly, we're not articulating that that's what we're fighting for. And that is, I think if we can get that, if we can take the energy of young people, young progressives, activists, with the right policy, then we're not fighting with ourselves. We're actually working towards something that I think we actually all, as Democrats, value. So
we're gonna wrap it up. We're gonna wrap it up. We're gonna wrap it up. So I want
a little tired because I took a red eye.
He took a red eye to be made. Listen. Let me say this. Okay. There are other members of Congress who would not do this because we have asked. We have asked, and we have asked and asked and asked. And so the congressman was 24 hours ago was voting, flew here and is here, and withstood the fury of Sacramento Bee subscribers. So we thank you for that. So I want to give you the opportunity to make a closing remark, and then we will kindly talk to the congressman.
Look, our country's at a really pivotal point. You do see generational tensions in America. You see them in our own community right now. You see a ton of families that are struggling. If you haven't had a chance to go out to the food banks, if you haven't had a chance to see how long the lines are, food insecurity in this community was already incredibly bad before the shutdown. It is worse now than it was during the pandemic. It is about to get much worse. What you saw, if the Medicaid cuts stay in place, you'll see a collapse of rural health care, but you will see a real health care crisis in our own community and across this country. You will see emergency rooms packed. We've been talking to the hospitals, to the county to say, okay, how do we get ahead of this? The federal government, at least in the next 3 years under Donald Trump, is not going to come to the rescue. This is not going to be like the pandemic where we were in a similar situation and the federal government pushed billions of dollars out. We're going to have to figure out at least in the next 3 years, how we get through this together, looking after one another, working together, and so forth. I get it that if we want to win elections, it's not just going to be about running against Donald Trump. We have to have concrete ideas that reflect our values and have to have that plan. We have to have it in 2026, but we absolutely have to have it in 2028 if we want to win back the country. I'm an optimist. I believe in this country. I believe the generational change is a natural evolution. We are, over this next decade, going to pass that baton on to the next generation. I also agree with Flo's point that we we should be mentoring those young leaders right now. We should be thinking about it. We should be talking about policies. What does this look like? We should be creating positions for those folks that come into the fold. I'm interested, I want Mayor Mamdani to be successful here, because if you could do it in New York City, you can do it anywhere in the country. And he's gonna be testing things, right? We're gonna test things out and see what's successful, and we should be trying things right now. So I'm optimistic about our region and what we can accomplish, because I do think we look after one another, and we're going to have to figure this out in the next couple of years. So to the Bee, thank you for doing this. I'm happy to come back. These are never easy, because people are scared, people are passionate, and people believe in our democracy, but we've got to fight for it.